I like to ask my clients or prospective clients, like, when's the last time you had your accountant, attorney, financial advisor, and business advisor sitting around a table talking about your agenda?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind Their Success podcast. I'm Peyton Squires, the host, and today we have on Joseph Lopresti. Joseph is the founder of Clear Path Family Office and Arlington Wealth Management and is the co-author of Exit by Design. He has 40 years of experience helping business owners maximize wealth, minimize taxes, and transition out of their businesses on their own terms. Joseph, good morning. Welcome on Behind Their Success.
Good morning, Peyton. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. It sounds like me and you are at least complementary type businesses. Kind of tell me what you do.
Yeah, so we work with entrepreneurs to kind of get over that last 20 yards of their career. We think many of them are very good at getting to the, using a football analogy, get to the 20-yard line by being craftsmen and, building a great business. But many of them find, I think, complexity between that 20-yard line and the end zone and, how to get to where they want to be, which for most of them is achieving financial freedom and just really more personal freedom, which of course financial is part of it. So we try to unravel all that complexity to, get them into the end zone and live the life that they want.
Yeah, that's very cool. You're helping a lot of entrepreneurs really, at the back end, kind of a little bit of their career ride, or I guess maybe not, it doesn't have to necessarily be their last business, but you're helping them get the business ready to sell, right? And then execute the sale. Is that correct?
We are, and we really help with a whole array of planning the business strategy and coordinating it with their personal wealth planning centered around, what they want out of life. Because I think a lot of them have good advisors, but many of the advisors, I should say, work in kind of a siloed professional silo, where they get accounting advice or legal advice or financial advice, but there's nobody really coordinating all that to make sure that it's going to be optimal for the business owner and what their life desires are.
Oh, yeah. And what you're explaining there of, advisors and silos and whatnot, that's completely been my experience. I'm a CPA, CFP kind of, so I'm, very, very similar type business model. And that's what we've been really working on inside of our own business is breaking down those silos, and why I kind of straddle the tax and the wealth world and helping people, because it's true. It's most people, they have a financial advisor, maybe they have a tax advisor, an insurance person, and then an attorney, and like getting all that synced up, or even get the advisors not to just constantly be giving you conflicting advice. It's kind of tough to do, right?
Yeah, conflicting advice and really, there's gaps in the planning because they are working in these silos, and it exposes some dangers in some cases. I've run into that. And in many other cases, it just misses tremendous opportunities to build family wealth, as opposed to having, I like to ask my clients or prospective clients, like, when's the last time you had your accountant, attorney, financial advisor, and business advisor sitting around a table talking about your agenda?
And the answer is never, right?
The answer is never. I mean, unless they're really big, if they have really big businesses, then they probably do have an internal team, that does that. But that's really what ClearPoint Family Office does, is we get all of the key advisors sitting around a table talking about the business owners, the entrepreneur's agenda, not their own agenda, because in a lot of cases, that's what the advice, comes from, not because it's immoral advice. That's not what I'm getting at. It's just that they don't know what they don't know. Your
Correct.
Financial advisor probably doesn't know much about talking to you about your business strategy. And your attorney doesn't know much about talking about your insurance or other types of needs. So having them all sit around the table to talk about your agenda really gets synergies and collaboration going and maximizes opportunities.
Yeah. And it's, your insurance person, your tax person, so your financial advisor. I mean, everybody has their own perspectives, right? Like, the tax guy's always thinking about the tax perspective, and it's just blending all those perspectives, right? To find, okay, here's the right answer of like, the blending all those perspectives. And this is kind of a right answer that satisfies all the perspectives and, the client's agenda, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the entrepreneur's never really done it before. In many cases, the business owners we work with are the founding business owners who have been, running their business for maybe 10, 20, 30 years. And they're very good at what they do, but they've never exited a business before, whether it's an internal transition or they're going to sell. So it creates some anxiety around the whole process. They end up procrastinating because it's not what they're an expert at.
Yeah.
So having a team, or, I like to call it a personal chief financial officer that's going to know what the business owner is really after in life, and then coordinating all the planning around that, I think is a huge value add for a business owner through their whole career, really, ideally, but most of them don't start really thinking about it till they get, start to think about that end game.
Yeah. Yeah. That transition process, that exit, right? Or, depending on what that transition process, or you're selling out to private equity or whatnot. But you're right. I mean, for most people, most business owners, entrepreneurs, that's going to be the biggest transaction they ever do in their life, right? So, man, really doing your due diligence and doing the planning beforehand, right? Because so many people, it's like, hey, I got a check, and what do I do now? There's so much more stuff, if you have a runway of knowing, hey, in like 3 months, 6 months, I'm going to do this. Getting that planning in place is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And even better, if you're thinking it out, say 3 years.
Yeah, because you're going to have to make a bunch of tweaks to the business, right? Like you need to make, for most part, for a lot of businesses, you got to go in there and fix your financials. Like they're not on accrual accounting. They're not in any position that private equity is going to come in and, consider them a serious business, right? So yeah, they usually spend years, right, trying to tweak and get the business ready to even, hey, I got this nice, cool asset here, that's attractive to sell. And then often when the entrepreneurs do all that, they spend all the time fixing their business, right? And then they're like, well, maybe I should just keep it. It's kind of nice now.
Yep, I've seen that a number of times too, where they realize that, now I have the personal freedom that I didn't have before because, maybe the business was a little too dependent on them, or in some cases, all, completely dependent on
them. I mean, and most are, right? Like most are.
Right. One of the first things we like to do is establish the current value in the marketplace for a business owner, and really help them understand what the business is worth in the market, not how it's valued in their eyes or from a background type of perspective, but what do you think it's actually worth to a buyer, right? And then work on, number one, protecting that value. Right. They're way beyond startup now, and protecting what they've built is really the first priority. Second priority then is how do we enhance that value? And you started to get into it by cleaning up the financials, but there's a number of different metrics, right, that we're going to look at that could show them, hey, this is what it's worth today. This is what it could be worth if you work on these specific areas and get those little bit higher score in those areas, and then go into the transition readiness of the business and their personal readiness to transition, because that's a huge factor in a business owner's life, and having it be well thought out, an enjoyable experience, that they are educated on the whole process of what they're going to experience, and that they can make wise decisions because they didn't get blindsided by something they didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a big tax bill.
That's a huge
one.
That's a huge one. And you really have to start that. Ideally, you're starting that, a few years before that tax planning and entity, structure, and you could weave in asset protection with that. You could weave in wealth transfer, to take care of their families in a much better way, as opposed to just thinking about it, like you said earlier, well, I got a check now, what do I do? You miss a lot of opportunity to build family wealth that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And, you talk about the personal side of the transition. I think that's huge too, so the entrepreneur spent the last 20 years building this business and then they sell it. Many entrepreneurs talk about after they sell the business, like they feel bad when they just cut off their cash flow, right? In a lot of ways, right? So you gotta understand that and go into that like eyes wide open because like, hey, when you're considering selling a business, right? You're selling this asset, you're going to lose your cash flow coming out of it, right? Like whatever cash flow you're getting, it's gone now. You're going to get it replaced with a check. But then you've honestly really just created a new problem where you've got this check that you got to figure out how to turn back into cash flow, right? That all can be done with proper planning. But, and sometimes I think people don't understand that or consider that. Like, you're giving up one asset for really just a different one and really thinking through, is that actually what you want to do or not? Does that make the most sense for you?
Exactly. And that's, in some cases that's what I was getting at earlier, where if you talk to a financial advisor, most of them are going to say, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense because now we could invest the money and I know how to do that. And we could,
Yeah. Yeah.
get you the cash flow that you need. But is that always the right advice for the entrepreneur? Maybe selling isn't the best thing to do. Maybe they should be thinking about diversifying some of their equity in the business, but not all. And in other cases, maybe their best opportunity is just keep growing it. So the financial advisor, in many cases, isn't necessarily equipped to provide that level of advice to a business owner. So you really, I think, have to have a team of advisors that is experienced in going through that process with that other business owners have already gone through.
It's just finding people that have been there before, right? Like that have that experience that, have walked through situations very similar, right? And just, having them kind of lead you through it, right? And you're right. Most financial advisors, they're not dealing with stuff like this, right? They're dealing with mom and pop saving for retirement. And that's not a disparaging thing or anything on them. It's just they're not necessarily equipped or have the knowledge to handle transactions like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's, financial advisors know what they know. But, you brought up a really good thing like that cash flow after the sale or, during the transition process, for example. So that's where weaving in the personal wealth planning with the business strategy is imperative, in my opinion. What we'll do for every client is we'll develop a lifetime cash flow plan. They could be 10 years out from selling the business, but we want them to see on paper what this is going to look like between now and when they're ready to sell, through the transition, life after the sale, how they're going to be getting their cash flow. It also helps you plan for tax efficiency on a number of fronts. One is through the transaction, which you've already, alluded to as a huge potential opportunity for business owners, right? They do that advanced tax reduction planning on the transaction, but then being able to set up their cash flow in a tax efficient way after the sale. A lot of times it's hard to do that if you wait till after the sale, but if you start ahead of time, you could set it up so your cash flow is either tax free or tax advantaged after the sale. And that's a big wealth builder because taxes are going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest expenses for a business owner. It's certainly one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. And I think the key piece of advice with all of this is the longer the runway you have, the better plan that you can put into place, right? Like, just putting those pieces in place. And you're right. If you start really planning out this transaction, say 3 years in advance, there's a whole lot of moves you can make to start preparing things and putting capital in certain places and to really set yourself up to make that transaction as least taxing as possible and just allow you to keep as much money as you can from the transaction, right?
Yeah, keep the money for the transaction and keep it in the family, right? Because for a lot of business owners, taking care of their heirs is one of their biggest concerns, and you miss big opportunities if you don't plan that out. Be proactive with that planning.
Yeah, I've been in the industry long enough. I'm sure you have too. You've seen a lot of situations that, man, if they'd have just done a little bit of planning, you know what I mean? It would have turned out totally different.
Yeah, it's amazing how many stories you hear about. Well, and oftentimes we'll get referred business owners that have already sold. And
Yeah.
really, that's one of the reasons why we've moved into this niche, is because we realized that after meeting those business owners, we could have added so much value to their life had we met them a few years before the sale. That's why working with business owners is our niche, and then doing that coordinated planning before the sale, through the transaction, and after is, I think, a huge advantage for many business owners.
Are you looking for a new tax experience? Looking for an advisor that actually brings you high-level ideas and proactively plans so you aren't overpaying your taxes? Or how about one that even just responds and communicates in a timely fashion? If any of that resonates with you, you probably just have a tax preparer and not a tax planner. And it is through the tax planning process where all the value is found. And when tax planning is done right, it has a positive return on investment. I'm Peyton Squires. I'm a CPA and owner of Squires Tax Planning. We work alongside entrepreneurs and high-income earners, helping them pay the least amount of income taxes, both legally and ethically. We have saved our clients hundreds of thousands of dollars through specific strategies, and we guarantee we can find multiple tax strategies that your current tax preparer hasn't told you about. If that interests you, head over to squirestaxplanning.com. There you can take our free assessment to see how likely it is that you are overpaying on your income taxes. From there, you can also book a free tax discovery call with our team to see what it would look like to have us working for you. So kind of looking back on your career, Joseph, like, what would you say has been your best skill, that's led to your success? Or, what's your superpower? What are you really good at that has allowed you to, build a successful business as you have?
That's a really great question. So I think maybe a couple of areas where my strengths are. One is in educating people. I taught investment courses back in the day when we were investment focused advisors. And today, I think one of the biggest areas that an advisor could do, whether they're a financial advisor or a legal advisor, whatever the profession is to educate their client on what their options are. Right? These are smart people. They're successful people. They feel comfortable making key decisions. They don't want them to be made for them, but they just want to know what their options are, and then they can make the smartest decisions. So educating people on all of these different areas of decisions they're going to face. They're going to face investment decisions. They're going to face tax decisions. They're going to face asset protection and wealth transfer decisions. And there's a whole array of business decisions they're going to be facing. How their key employees are going to be treated, and their customers, their suppliers, their vendors, who the ideal buyers are, what type of transaction. There's just so many different decisions. So giving them an education in these areas so they don't go into it. They go into it with their eyes wide open. And then I find that they can make really good decisions in most cases.
Yeah, totally my experience too. And I see myself as like a teacher, educator, right? Like my job is to be sitting down with the clients, figuring out what their goals are, like what do you want to happen? And then I'm there to help hold your hand through the thing, right? And just help you, try to do all that in its most efficient way as possible. But it really is, it's just a relationship, right? I tell them all the time, it's like, hey, your decisions are your decisions. I'm here to just give you the lay of the land, the pros and cons of everything, right? And give you the lay of the land, but ultimately it's your decisions to make, right? And it's just helping them make confident decisions so they know the pros and the cons of any of those decisions.
That's exactly right. It's laying out their options, making sure they know them, that they're not missing something important in their own thinking, I think is a big one. And that they know all their options is really, I think, one of my strengths. And another area that I think I'm good at is just strategic planning, right? How to take a complex picture, with a lot of moving pieces, and how to lay out a strategic plan that can help you get from where you are to the other side of it, where you have that more simple life and prosperity, and living the life that you want. That's an area that I think not only me, but my team at ClearPoint excel at.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, even on the personal side. So they get, let's say they get past the transaction, they better figure out what they want to do because, they can only go to Cancun and sit on the beach for so long before they'll get bored out of their minds. Especially if they're, this hard driving entrepreneur having to, their whole life. So really thinking about life after the sale, like even just from a personal standpoint of what am I going to do with my life day to day? Also something very important to think about before you just kill off your business, right? By selling it. You're going to have to find something to do.
Yeah, we call that a personal action plan, right? What are you going to do Monday morning after you sell? Right. You can't wait till the week before to figure that out, because you're right. These are driven people. They're many cases their business is their identity. It's their baby. It's what they've built and what they're most proud of. Sometimes they put that ahead of their own children, in terms of their accomplishments in life and things like that. So having that figured out ahead of time, I had one client tell me, when I was working, I used to really enjoy golf because I wasn't working. But now that I'm not working, I don't enjoy golf because it's like work for me now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a total shift in perspective, right? It's sitting on the beach for the rest of your life sounds okay when you never get to do it, right? But once you're there, I mean, there's only so many Mai Tais you can drink, and then you gotta go find some more purpose. And it's just thinking through that, like you said, planning through that stuff. But
yeah, and I think some entrepreneurs have that flushed out in their mind a little bit better than others. Some need help in flushing that out of what life after business looks like. But again, if you could start the process a few years ahead of time, you could really design what your life is going to look like. Maybe you want to be involved in the business in some way, or maybe you want to be involved with other causes, in some way that you could start moving towards in a transition and see how you like it. As opposed to just, when I sell, this is what I'm going to do. And then there's a void in their life in many cases when you approach it cold turkey.
Yeah. It's leading up to that. Like you said, maybe trying a few things, maybe, looking at a few different charitable organizations, maybe that you're interested in, or whatever that is, whatever drives you. Maybe it's Little League baseball. I mean, it doesn't matter, but, especially that entrepreneur, right? The people listening to this, the people that build those big businesses, sitting on the couch is not going to be a long-term thing. Oh man, at all. Joseph, just kind of looking back, what would you say has been the most rewarding experience? I'm sure you've worked with lots of different clients over the, 40 years or so you've been in business. What would you credit as like the most rewarding experience for you?
Well, as it comes to working with clients, I think it's just helping them achieve success as how they define it. Seeing where they were years ago and where they are today, there's just a lot of satisfaction in that. For my own personal business satisfaction is working with my daughter. My daughter, Marissa, is part of my team. And, we've been working together for maybe close to a decade now. Awesome. And, seeing her growth, and really I credit her for kind of pushing us towards working with business owners exclusively in terms of new clients today. She saw that as an area where I didn't see it, as an area that we could excel. So that, I credit her for, that focus that we have today.
That's what everybody should be looking at in their own businesses, is that focus, right? Whatever that is, or that niche, or that, that specific group that you really speak to and work with, and all those things. So yeah, that's great. So, you start your business 40 years ago, right? From today's perspective, if you could go back and talk to yourself, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself? You're starting at the beginning. You could go back today and you could tell yourself one thing. What would it be?
I think it would have to be establish your niche early in the career. I started, me personally, having been 40 years in the wealth management industry, 25 years with my wealth management company, Arlington Wealth Management. So had we focused on working with business owners earlier, I think that we would be even more successful than we are today.
Mhm. Yeah. Same here. Same story. I niched down into entrepreneurs and business owners myself, I'm a longtime CPA and spent a lot of my career as just like a generalist, right? Like kind of everybody is. Is great advice is really find the group of people you serve best and that you speak to best. I kind of consider myself entrepreneur CPA. And the reason why I think I'm good at that is because I've run a lot of businesses myself, right? Like we speak the same kind of language, right? I understand entrepreneurs, at a deeper level, kind of what drives them. I'm good at serving them. But I spent a lot of years just being the everything to everybody, right? And if you're everything to everybody, well, you're not really that valuable to anybody. It's finding those people that you can serve and give them a ton of value. And that's when in turn you can have a really nice amount of value to yourself.
Yeah, I think I find myself in a similar position as you, as being a business owner. I worked for some of the big banking investment firms early in my career, and pretty quickly realized that culture was not didn't resonate well with me. So, starting my company 25 years ago now, I go through a lot of the same things that every other business owner goes through. The same types of complexity and decision points that they're going to be making. So I feel like I have that a little bit more of a perspective of what a business owner wants or needs compared to maybe other financial advisors that haven't started their own business.
Yeah, and I see that in my world so much, where it's the type of personalities that are attracted to becoming CPAs, right? They're typically very analytical, not entrepreneurial type-minded people, just generally speaking. I've gotten a lot of feedback from the market that entrepreneurs get frustrated by that, right? Because they're generally way different than their CPAs, which is good in some ways. That the CPAs need to sometimes put the brakes on some of these entrepreneurs. But the struggle in my industry is just very few people are strategic. It's very much a compliance-driven, backwards-looking industry, and not this strategic, forward-looking tax planning, kind of industry. It's all like, let's fill out all the boxes and get the taxes done. And that's kind of what the industry does. And that's fine, but it's not adding a ton of value to the clients, right?
100%. And so my experience is the same, that, once we started to work with advanced tax planners that were specialists in certain areas of tax planning, I realized that why didn't my CPA tell me about that opportunity or program, or why aren't they at least, not that I would definitely do a specific tax strategy, but I want to know about it, right? Just like, I want to be educated. I want to know what my options are so I can make the best decisions. And, my eyes really opened up that most accountants are going to be that backward looking, more, let's make sure you don't get in trouble, as opposed to how do we make this better type of advisor.
Yeah, and 100%. And that's not to say anything bad about, any accountants. That's just how the industry is. That's how it runs. And it's such kind of a broken industry where it's, all the work's jammed in. We're recording this on April 16th. I just, yesterday was a big day for me.
Right. Right.
And all this work is jammed in such a small amount of time that everybody's just trying to get the work done, right? There is zero strategy. Their incentive is to get the tax return filed and filed correctly. Not, hey, let's plan around this. Let's do this. Do you think about doing this? That doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's pretty rare in my experience as well, Peyton.
Yeah. Well, Joseph, I know you got a book you've kind of come out with, right? Fairly recently. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I co-authored the book with my daughter, Marissa. It's called Exit by Design. The book is really about a lot of the things we discussed today. It's about coordinating the business strategy with the personal wealth planning, and really securing the freedom that I think many entrepreneurs, the reason they start their businesses, they're after freedom. They struck out on their own. They didn't want to, they wanted to do things on their own terms, and that's what they value the most. So, having that coordination of planning around securing their freedom is really important, I think, for every entrepreneur out there. Yeah, anybody could get a e-version of it on the book's website. It's exitbydesignbook.com.
Joseph, anything else you want to leave for the listeners? Any piece of advice before we sign off?
I would just say, it's probably a little cliche, but start your exit planning early. It is good business strategy in general. It does improve your value of your enterprise. And in many cases, it'll help you personally as well by giving you more personal freedom. If you're focusing on things that the business eventually is going to have to do to make it transition ready, do it now. And it'll give you a lot more personal satisfaction and probably make you more money as well along the way.
Yeah. And like, we kind of started off with this whole conversation where it's like, people like fix their business to get it to sell it. It's like, well, thinking through this process would allow you to find some issues probably in your business that you can fix. And guess what? It doesn't mean you have to sell the business. You just get the benefits of your business being fixed, which is great, right? And maybe when that happens, maybe you don't want to sell a business. Maybe you do have a great asset there that you'd love to keep. But it's just, like you said, it's really just thinking through that kind of stuff and seeing how you can make that asset just a little bit better in one way or another.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And what's interesting is we find that most younger entrepreneurs today are bringing that exit planning strategy or transition readiness into their business strategy earlier in the career, whereas the baby boomers really don't think about it until they get towards their end game.
Yeah. And I tell you what, there's a whole lot of baby boomers out there right now sitting on businesses that need some transition planning.
That's right.
If they want to get any value out of it, whatsoever, they need to start putting a plan together. Well, Joseph, man, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on the show. Listeners, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.